Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, dear participants. Wherever you're joining from at this webinar, it's my pleasure to welcome you at this webinar, which is organized by FAO within the event of the World Antimicrobial Awareness Week 2022. My name is Koen Tiens. I'm an AMR program specialist at FAO, and I will be the master of ceremonies today. And it's a pleasure to see that so many have connected, and I'm sure some will join within the following minutes. This webinar puts the spotlights on the FAO Progressive Management Pathway on AMR, and it will show how it has helped countries with developing and implementing their national action plans on AMR. And we will hear experiences from different regions and countries in the world. After the opening remarks by the FAO CVO, the Progressive Management Pathway for AMR, or the FAO PMP AMR as we name it, will be introduced to you by Antonio Valcarce, and then Irene Uwaba will share her experiences with implementing the FAO PMP AMR in the African region. Finally, we have a panel debate with experts that have implemented the PMP in their country or even used the PMP for improving AMR management in a specific livestock production sector. There's a few practical arrangements I have to explain. This is a Zoom webinar, so you can pose your questions to the presenters in the and the panel members in the Q&A tool, which you can find on the bottom of your screen. And I will then address the questions to the different participants, to the different presenters or panel members. Some of the questions will be responded to directly in the Q&A box. This webinar will be recorded and will be made available to all participants after this webinar. And before we start, I would like to thank June Kim, especially. She's an animal health officer at FAO headquarters, who did all the jobs and all the work behind the scene to make this webinar happen. Having said, it's my pleasure to hand over to Keith Sumption, Chief Veterinary Officer and leader of the Animal Health Program at FAO, and also Chief of the Joint Zoonotic Disease and AMR Center at FAO. Keith will share a few opening remarks. Over to you, Keith.
Thank you very much, Koen, and thank you everyone for joining this this webinar. Indeed, a huge amount is happening this week on AMR, including the Oman Ministerial Meeting, and it started for many of us last Friday with the launch of the partnership platform for AMR. So, tremendous amount of international interest. We're glad that you can join. One of the crucial and difficult parts of AMR is that it appears to be very complex, needing the engagement of multiple sectors, multiple stakeholders, and it needs to start in reality where people are now. So that's where something like a progressive management pathway has the greatest attraction for me, because FAO has had an experience over the past 15 years of developing progressive management approaches to help countries get started with complex problems, bringing people together around the same end. Antimicrobials play a crucial role in securing the health of animals, humans, and plants, as well as in food safety and food security. However, we do understand that AMR is a silent pandemic. It is already causing scales of attributed mortality, which are really alarming and on the scale of other pandemics, driven by the overuse and misuse of antimicrobials, which are so vital for our health in all our sectors. The urgency, the importance of addressing this is growing, and for that, we do need coordinated approaches in all countries if we're going to achieve any reduction in the AMR development and achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. FAO's support to countries is guided by its One Health Priority Programme area, the One Health Priority Programme, And so this is all part of our 9-year strategic framework in which we aim to offer an integrated package of support services across agriculture, fisheries, and environment sectors, and coordinated in the case of AMR and One Health with our quadripartite partners, that is with the World Organization for Animal Health, the World Health Organization, and the UN Environment Programme. We have together, just a couple of weeks ago, launched our One Health Joint Plan of Action, in which AMR is one of the 6 action tracks. Back in December 2016, countries committed themselves to developing and implementing multi-sectoral national action plans to address AMR under the umbrella of the Global Action Plan on AMR. Since then, 148 countries have finalized their development of the national action plans on AMR. 38 countries are still in the process of developing one. Challenges remain in the implementation of these national action plans, especially regarding the incorporation of food and agriculture sectors. The recent results from the tripartite AMR country self-assessment survey, also known as TRACS, also highlighted the need to formalize and strengthen multi-sectoral collaboration mechanisms to ensure that all sectors are involved in coordinating and monitoring in their contribution to the NAPs. So where does the Progressive Management Pathway for AMR fit in? This has been developed to help countries address these complex challenges and bring in the sectors that matter into developing the food and agriculture components of the national action plans on AMR. The PMP AMR promotes a complete One Health approach, encouraging food and agriculture stakeholders to take ownership in this multi-sectoral setting. Since the launch of the PMP for AMR back in 2019, that's just over 2 years ago, 28 countries across all our regions have used the tool to improve the implementation of their national action plans. And 20 more countries have indicated their willingness and interest to take up this approach. In today's webinar, my colleagues will present how FAO has supported countries in managing AMR using the PMP, the Progressive Management Pathway for AMR. So welcome to this meeting, and we look forward to your discussion with you, your comments, and we hope your interest throughout. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith, for your kind remarks and openings. We will directly move on to the next presentation, which is actually presenting and introducing the FAO PMP AMR to you from a global perspective and in general terms. And that will be done by Antonio Valcarce. He is a senior advisor on antimicrobial resistance at the Joint Zoonotic Diseases and AMR Center at FAO headquarters. And he is also the project implementation lead for the Fleming Fund project. Antonio, I hand over to you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Cohen. I'm sharing my screen now.
Yes, Antonio.
Here you go. Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Cohen. Thank you, Keith, for that remarks. I'm going just to go briefly through the overall view of the Progressive Management Pathway, the PMP, as Kuhn has said. The presentation is divided in 4 areas. The first one is just to explain a bit the challenges of the implementation of the national action plans, then why we need this tool, the PMP. Then it will follow what is the tool itself, and finally, how do we support that assessment? Moving on, we're going to start with the challenges of implementing national action plans, which is mainly related to the challenges that the countries face in doing so. As Keith has quite rightly said, the countries in the political declaration to December 2016 they committed themselves to develop national action plans based on the global action plan, to strengthen their integrated surveillance, to promote good animal production, to reduce the use, especially the non-therapeutic use of the antimicrobial agents, to monitor how the use of antimicrobial is going, manage the impact of the antimicrobial resistance, support studies, and many more. So, as Keith has said, the solution to this complex problem is also really complex, and that commitment, high-level commitment, was approached under the One Health approach to ensure that it was encompassing all the factors that has to be taken into consideration. As Keith has also mentioned, to see how this commitment was being implemented, the tracks was set up, and we had some interesting information that I'm not going to repeat. Keith already has mentioned that the number of countries that has developed the national action plan, but more importantly is to observe that the implementation is what probably is being found more difficult or challenging. So why is then FAO PMP needed? To address the One Health challenge around the coordination and implementation of the national action plans, this tool is trying to help countries in doing so by giving a view or monitoring the progress made by countries on the implementation of the national action plan, identify the actions needed to address the gaps, or if you want to put it that way, the action needed to progress in that implementation. And very importantly, the tool helps to prioritize those actions, having or taking into consideration the resource-limited situation in where many countries may find themselves. And all this under a One Health approach, but focusing or covering, obviously, the agri-food sector of the National Action Plan. So eventually, the end goal of the food and agriculture components of the National Action Plans are the prudent use of antimicrobials in the food and agriculture sectors, and the full monitoring, prevention, and control of antimicrobial resistance in food and agriculture sectors. And that is what the PMP AMR aims to guide countries to achieve. Oops. So now, trying to explain what is the tool itself, I have to say the tool is a very, as we said before, the implementation, development and implementation of national action plans is as complex as the problem itself, as Keith highlighted in the remarks. So the tool itself is quite complex. What I'm going to try to do here very briefly is to give a snapshot of how this tool is structured or works, which is not always easy if you don't see the whole thing. So bear with me, and if you got any questions, please just put it in the chat, and I'll try to clarify that. The tool was launched in 2019 and used a stepwise approach to reach an ideal status, right, of management of the AMR-IMU. The tool is divided in 5 areas: awareness, surveillance, governance, best practice, and responsible use, and analyze with the country teams what is the situation in each of those. That stepwise, as you can see, pick up each one of those 5 areas and groups them or divide them in 4 stages, from the most basic one, which is the number 1 there, to the full implementation of what is in the National Action Plan at the top, which is the number 4. Sorry. The tool will be during the time, the workshop where the tool is implemented, that lasts for about 3 days, depending on the situation. It will be assessing each of the areas in all these 4 levels. And in addition, it will include guidance, documents, quite a lot of help to find out exactly where we are. And in the next slide, I think you could see each of those 4 steps we have seen in an example here. This is in particular is regarding training, for instance. The tool provides different situations that will make the country situation to fall in one of those steps. You can see in number 1, you assess the situation, just an inventory of system training opportunities, very basic things. If you progress to the second stage, you will have small scale initiatives. And if you progress in your implementation, or you are more advanced in your implementation of your National Action Plan, you go already nationwide activities in basic or key agriculture sectors. And eventually, in the final step, you got fully implemented. And we're talking in particular here about trainings. This is just an example how the stepwise works. Once you have done that with an area, you need to see how much have you achieved, because sometimes you may not have finished doing what, for instance, in step 2 is required, but you are doing things. So you could have what we call an implemented or planned situation or other stages that will have a value, because you need to assess, you need to allocate in the tool some values, some indicators of where you are at to eventually finally get what we need from the tool. So that's what we got. Specific activities, we got key performance indicators, and so on and so forth, that will tell us at what stage we are in each of the steps. When all that is done in every area, and as I say, it's quite complex, it lasts a couple of days at least, the tool provides this type of dashboard. We start during the workshops from a very, very breakdown situation, very detailed, to eventually come up with this more general overview. In this particular case, you're seeing 4 areas. I said that is divided in 5 in practices. We'll go covering the other 2, the uses and practices. In here you can see there are 2 types of numbers, the numbers in black and the numbers in red, because the tool tells countries, first of all, how much of what is needed to be in a national action plan is actually in there. So it helps to develop it. You can see, for instance, in awareness, in a stage 2, in black, you got 83%. Well, that means that there's still something else missing in that national action plan. But regardless what is in there, what they have completed is just 67%. So that is the first type of information this tool is giving you. How well or how much is developed, and out of what you have developed and approved in your country, how much has been implemented. The next thing that the tool will give you, and this is a product after the discussions during the time the tool is implemented, the workshop, which brings together, or is meant to be together, all the actors related to the agri-food sector, including human health and environment. And during those discussions, as I said, the group agreed some actions, some activities that if I'm allowed to go back, will help you to progress, for instance, in awareness from 80% in the stage 1 to 100%. I don't know exactly what could be, but if something is missing to achieve that 100%, it might be, well, an action agreed in here. So basically what the tool is helping is to show, to put together in just one single view, what are the places where acting you will achieve the most efficient progress in the implementation of the action plan. And those are the actions you can see there that the tool at the end of the workshops will provide countries with. And now how we support this assessment. As I said, the implementation of the tool requires 2, 3, sometimes 4 days workshop, depending on the complexity of the particular implementation in a specific country, workshop, where we bring together all the stakeholders involved in the implementation. And as I said, we try to involve always the human health sector and environment. And we also normally count with the presence of the WOA colleagues. During that workshop, there is an open discussion where everybody sometimes meet for the first time or second time, trying to have an open discussion to show where we at every single step the tool will be presented to the participants, to identify as well the actions that will be needed and the type of collaboration, contribution, and very importantly, who is going to take ownership of that action and the deadline to have it implemented. And as Keith has mentioned, today we got 28 countries that have already been assessed, and there are a few more in the pipeline. At the minute, we have pilot tested in all FAO regions. Well, the pilot has already been finished. We are now implemented as is in a normal pace. There is the tool is available, has been translated to French, English, French, Spanish, and Russian already, because it has been used in all those languages. We in FAO provide to those workshops the facilitators, the help to run through this complex exercise. And we are currently updating the user manual, and we are constantly looking for ways to make this tool more friendly or easy to use or practical to implement, because as I said, the complexity of the subject makes the tool complex as well. So we're trying always to try to make it as easy as possible. And that's all from my side. Thank you for listening. If you got any questions, please paste them in the chat, and we will be glad of my colleagues to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you for being brief and clear. So yes, again, let me repeat, if you have any questions to Antonio, please post your questions in the Q&A box and we can address them later on. So let's now move on to listening to some experiences in countries, in regions with the implementation of the PMP AMR. So we're going to have a focus on the way progress was made with the implementation of PMP AMR in Africa. And for that, it's my pleasure to present and introduce to you Dr. Irene Uwoba. Irene is the regional AMR coordinator at the FAO regional office in Africa, for Africa. She is also the focal person, AMR focal person for Sub-Saharan Africa, and has additional coordination mandates for West and Central Africa. So she's covering almost the whole of Africa. Irene is a microbiologist by training and was a research scientist and lecturer for 18 years before joining FAO in 2018. And Irene has really done great efforts with implementing the PMP AMR in Africa, even during the difficult times of COVID, where we were restricted to meet. She still managed to organize a number of those workshops in Africa. Irene, I'm happy to hand over to you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kun, and good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, clear.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure for me to share briefly what we have done in Sub-Saharan Africa to support AMR mitigation using the PMP tool to really help country identify the priority activity to be implemented. Sorry, my connection is a bit slow. Yeah, so first of all, I would like to mention that we have done PMP in 17 countries in Africa overall, and in Sub-Saharan Africa, 15. And Antonio just mentioned that about 28 countries in the different regions have implemented the PMP, and you can see that half of it is in Africa. So I mean, we experienced the PMP first of all in Ghana. This is the country where the PMP was first piloted. And we realized that it's a powerful tool because it really helped us identify activities with the country. Countries have developed the National Action Plan. Some countries did not really detect what is priority to implement first. So we are really happy when we interact with the country, see the National Action Plan, see the document, and see, is this right? Is this really One Health? Is everything taken into account or not? And after that, also see with them what has been done, what has not been done, and what is priority to be implemented. So Antonio already mentioned the objective of the PMP, so I'm not going to comment on that anymore, but I would like to emphasize what the PMP, what the objective of the PMP for us at the regional office. Of course, it helped the country assess the National Action Plan, the document, and then the level of implementation. But for us, it's really important that to use the tool to ensure the development and implementation of One Health AMR maps, where the different areas of the food and agriculture sector are represented. Most of the map, you have of course, the human health sector, the public health sector, and then a little bit sometimes of the animal health sector. But not much is done to involve really the crop sector, the environment sector. So using the PMP and asking the question to the targeted multi-sectoral stakeholders really help us to identify the gap, at least for the food and agriculture sector, and help to fill them in the revised document. With the PMP, we also support the multi-sectoral coordination. It's usually the time when people come, they discuss, you realize that even if they have a multi-sectoral working group, it's not functional. And then the discussion starts there. It was maybe not the primary objective of the PMP, but running different PMP, we realize that is one of the equations where we can really support the country with that. And for us as well, it's about better define the strategy of AMR mitigation in the country and the region. It's very important because we have realized that when you go to country and propose activity, they may just accept because they are funding to support the activity, but it may not be their priority. So it's very important for us that whatever the support in the country is based on the priority we have identified with them using the PMP tool. And of course, this is one of the best approaches, at least for us, to help country find some funding, because after the PMP, we have the recommendation. And then with the report, they use the report for advocacy here and there. And we also help them with the quadripartite organization and other partners to request some funding for the country. And I will show a few examples very soon. So briefly, how we run the PMP, usually it was physical. Then with COVID, we went to physical, hybrid, and so on. And we managed to get all stakeholders, including the human health sector. This is very important because usually in countries, human health sector in terms of AMR mitigation, they are in advance compared to the rest. And in fact, in some countries, we realize that stakeholders for the human health have more information on the animal health side, at least in terms of legislation, than the people even from the animal health sector attending. So it's very important to gather everyone and to make sure we go One Health, although the tool is mainly based for the food and agriculture sector. And it's also for us an opportunity for advocacy. So when we go for PMP in the African region, we try to get the higher level governmental people there as much as we can, because it's where they start to understand the issue. And then is where we also take the opportunity to advocate for AMR to really be integrated in the priority of the government. So to run PMP, we need very well trained assessors. And for us, we make sure we train our staff and African region to support the country. So we have about 19 assessors right now, but 4 of them can really run the PMP independently. And this is very important for us because the HQ team is not always available, although really they help as much as they can, but it's very good for us to be independent on that so that we can support as much as country as we can. So usually, roughly, the first day of the PMP is general presentation, and then we make sure as much as we can that we have the quadripartite organization there if they can, whether on site, on hybrid, so that they can be as observer, but at the same time, they really usually come with a very interesting information that supports the countries. Then from the 2nd to the 4th day, we evaluate the National Action Plan according to the different 4 focus areas. Of course, we have the 5th objective of the FAO Action Plan, prudent use, that is also included in the good practices when we evaluated the country. And we evaluate the implementation of activity and the National Action Plan with regard to awareness, evidence, good governance, and good practices. Then, luckily, the tool will generate automatically the score. And then we discuss the different activities. And then where there is a gap, we try to identify if there is a priority there or not. And we at the end of the evaluation, we come up with a set of recommendations that are actually determined by the multi-stakeholder that are there during the PMP. And usually, is what we try to do now after the PMP. We got the recommendation, we got the key priority activity. We try to have another meeting to see how can we help them to move forward in terms of funding resources to support the implementation of the key priority activity they have identified. So this is just an example of how a result of the PMP looks. For example, is for country 1, you have on the left side, and country 2. It's always different. It's always different. If you see, for example, for awareness, my mouth is not moving properly. For example, here, the black one will be the level of implementation of, for example, stage 1 is the level, the basic activity. 100% for this country has been factored in the National Action Plan clearly. If you take country 2, it's only 50%. In terms of implementation, the red one, you can see country 2 is 33% and country 1, 17%. So the results are always variable from one country to another. But when we get results, we show them the result, and then we also try to see how they can improve, because the tool comes with different options of answer, whether it's planned, partially completed, or completed. So we try to show them this is your current situation, but then we simulate and show them if they complete what they have partially completed, how the score will improve. If you see in this particular country, for example, if you take in terms of implementation, current situation was 17%, but if they manage to finish what they have started, they will actually improve to 67%, just by completing what they have started. And then we also try to simulate the key action we have identified together. If they implement that one, how the score will be. So if we take again the stage 1, from 70%, it will go to 67%. And if they add the key priority actions identified, they will move to 82%. So it's kind of encourage them to see that the evaluation we are doing is just not to evaluate, but we really want to help them achieve something. So for this particular country here, the overall implementation for the country when we were doing the assessment was 8%. And if they finish what they have started, it will move to 38%. And if they apply the activity we have identified together with them during the PMP, it will go up to at least 67%. So it reassures us as well that what we have identified with them is actually very relevant, because when we simulate in the tool, the level of implementation increases. This is just an example to show you how the results will look. We have a column with the action where we identify with them, first of all, what needs to be amended in National Action Plan, and then what type of activity they need to implement to improve the implementation of National Action Plan. We identify with them who will be the responsible person or organization that will really support the agenda of implementing this activity, and then we try to identify with them a deadline for the activity. So it's the way roughly the recommendation come up. So after the implementation of the evaluation of using the PMP tool, like I said, we always try to help countries find the resources to support the activity. So starting by FAO, we have different projects, such as the GSSA, we have the MPTF project. At the regional level, we have some regular funds. So we make sure in each country we have done the PMP. When we are doing our work plan, we don't go anywhere else to look for the activity. We go straight to the recommendation of the PMP, and then we advise the team to use the recommendation and formulate the work plan. In that way, we can help the country really implement the National Action Plan. So these are just examples. For example, in Sierra Leone, the recommendation of the PMP was used to develop the work plan for the Fleming Fund country grant that is actually being implemented. Also, the USAID project. Kenya, you also have the MPTF. Madagascar is very special because this was the first time where we done the PMP, and all activity in the MPTF project comes from the recommendation from the PMP, so that we are sure that we can help them implement the National Action Plan. So these are just some activity that was implemented or being implemented after we have done the PMP in some countries. For example, if you take awareness, development of the communication strategy, of course, doing the awareness assessment, the CAP study, to see where the country is, where the knowledge is, so that we can better define the strategy, awareness raising campaign, training farmers, and also at the university level, developing a curricula on AMR, One Health, for example, in Senegal. Like I mentioned before, we always use PMP for advocacy. So on your right end, the first picture, this is the opening ceremony for the PMP in Mauritius, where we had the Minister of Agriculture, we have the WHO representative, the FAO representative, and then it's how they start understanding. I really like this one because the Ministry of Agriculture, I think, is the general attorney of the country. So he is a led person. So he stayed with us and invited us later for 3 hours to understand what we want to do in order to better support the country. The one below as well, we make sure the press comes so that it's also awareness. One is also on the news, people try to understand, ask a question, and we think that that way we can also contribute somehow for people starting to ask a question and ask information in order to better understand the problem of AMR. For example, with evidence in Sierra Leone, after the PMP, the HECTAR team has used the recommendation to try to support the lab with equipment, training staff, for example, in Madagascar as well. Mauritius, I understood that after the PMP, IOC, which is the Indian Ocean Commission, has taken the recommendation to support build the capacity of the lab, and Herman is there, he can give the testimony later, and also helping countries developing strategies. These are just some examples. In terms of governance, after the PMP, we were able, with the quadripartite counterpart, to support countries put in place multi-sectoral coordination group, mapping and revising legislation, and also revising the map. So this is the key, because we identified activity, the gaps in the document itself. So after the PMP, we try to help them revise the map, and WHO has doing very good on that. Each time we invite them, we detect a problem in terms of multi-sectoral coordination, in terms of revising the map, they step in and they help the country. So good practices as well. After the PMP, some countries were able to develop some guidelines and also implementing IPC in farm. So usually when we finish the PMP, there's an evaluation of the tool from the participant. So when we evaluated for the past year, we asked the question, for example, if the PMP is a friendly, user-friendly tool, and then we have like about 4 out of 5 average saying that it is. If the PMP tool is an approach that can be proposed to others, we can also see that the score is very good. And in terms of if the PMP need to be more One Health, you can see the red one, most of the people say yes. This is very important. Every time we go to the country, this is the question. Why is the PMP tool not a One Health and only focus on food and agriculture sector? So we see the dynamic. And then we also ask questions to the other sectors so that they don't feel isolated. And most of the time we realize that the other sector will come with very relevant information that can be useful to the animal health sector. So what are the lessons learned? We realized that the PMP tool is an excellent tool to support the revision of AMR NAP and the implementation of priority action. And this is the reason why you can see that we have up to 17 countries in Africa. Very important, so that everything we do is based on the priority identified with the country. It helps also fund, mobilize some funding from the country. And it also helps really bring attention to the food and agriculture sector, because AMR people still think human health in countries. But with the PMP, the stakeholders that attend are more aware of what are the risks in the food and agriculture sector. And like I mentioned before, it helps with advocacy and awareness raising. Very interestingly, most of the participants after the PMP, even if they were like AMR focal people or not, they always said that it increased their knowledge during the discussion. So we also try to link PMP with other FAO tools, like the Atlas tool that are for the surveillance system, and we try to run them together, and then we realize that the tools are complementary and can really help us better implement the PMP. So what did we notice in general? In general, after doing the PMP, we noticed that almost all NAPs in Africa need to be revised to make it more One Health and integrate more sector from the food and agriculture sector. So plant and crops, aquaculture and environment usually are less taken into account in the NAP, and then we always advise to revise and integrate activity on that. And in general, the overall implementation in Africa is low. It's 10 to 20% maximum. So there is a need to support the country to better implement the national action plan. So we also think this is the last slide, that for us, for the regional office for Sub-Saharan Africa, we will give priority to countries where PMP has been implemented, because we know exactly what they need. So it's better that way, although we will also support other countries when there are funding, but priority will be given there so that we know what we are really doing. And the first country that has been assessed in 2019, 2018, is also good to assess them now to see if there's any improvement. And lastly, very soon we'll be having more PMP in Mali and in Zambia, and then we hope it will also help the country. So this is just a summary of what we have been doing in Sub-Saharan Africa, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Irene. Good to hear from you how well the PMP works in your region and how it can really help the region to move to address the AMR issue and create momentum to get things moving on and moving forward. So there's a question about the implementation. There's a question from an anonymous attendee saying, I saw Ethiopia is implementing the PMP AMR in the report, and I'm not sure which report he is mentioning, concerning to. So why is Ethiopians' experience is not included in Irene's report? So Ethiopia, maybe we can give an update on Ethiopia, Irene. What's the status there for the PMP and AMR?
Yeah, I'm not aware of PMP in Ethiopia. Atlas, yes, but PMP, I'm not aware, unless they have run it without Cone and I. Yeah, so I think it's probably Atlas, not PMP. Maybe there's an intention, it's probably Atlas, but not PMP.
Yes, and I believe it's Ethiopia may be on the list for next year, I think, no? Anyway, thanks a lot. Very, very nice, Irene. If there's any other questions, please, from the participants, put them in the Q&A box. But I think it's to move on now to our debate. We have gathered experts which have experience with implementing the PMP in the country or evaluated the PMP even as a research topic. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you the panel members. And first of all, there's Dr. Etunya Yagasaikan from Mongolia. Dr. Etunya, she's the head of the Food Safety and Hygiene Laboratory at the Institute of Veterinary Medicine in Mongolia. She's a molecular biologist, and she was very supportive with implementing the PMP in Mongolia, and that was last year, in 2021. Next, there is Dr. Mohammed Abu Bakr from Pakistan. He is a veterinarian and has a PhD in microbiology. He is also the national AMR focal point for the livestock sector in Pakistan, and he's currently working as a senior scientific officer at the National Veterinary Laboratory in Islamabad in Pakistan. And he also supported the implementation of the PMP in Pakistan even a few weeks ago. Next, there is, I'm happy to introduce Dr. Diane Smith from Liberia. She's currently serving as the National AMR focal point for Liberia. She's a pharmacist with 10 years experience in health and in education sector. And she also supported then, of course, the implementation of the PMP in Liberia. Next, there's Henan Bobun from Mauritius. He's a senior veterinary officer at the Ministry of Agro-Industry and Food Security. Again, Henan helped with the implementation of the PMP in Mauritius earlier this year, if I'm correct. Then I'm happy to introduce Liz Alban to you. She's currently affiliated with the Danish Agriculture and Food Council. She is an adjunct professor at the University of Copenhagen, and she is working with risk-based surveillance and the control of use of antimicrobials and resistance in livestock. She has a PhD in veterinary epidemiology, and she is a diplomat at the European College of Veterinary Public Health. She is engaged in the PMP because she's sharing a working group in the Co-Eval AMR network in Europe, which has evaluated the tool as one of their activities. Next on the list is Mrs. Lara San Francesco. She is Director General of Una Italia. It's the association that represents more of the 90% of the Italian poultry sector. and she has started that mandate in 2012, and she focused with her colleagues and the members of the association on the attention of AMR, which with the aim to be part of the solution instead of the problem. So, and to address this relevant public health issue from her side. And with her organization, she also used the PMP to do an assessment of specifically of the poultry sector in Italy. And last but not least, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Giovanni Formato. He's an expert he's a veterinarian, an expert on bee diseases and management. So he is leading the laboratory of apiculture at the Animal Health and Food Safety Institute, the Istituto Zooprovlato Sperimentale de Lazio is Toscana in Italy, which is the FAO reference center for apiculture, health and biosecurity. So Giovanni is more engaged in the PMP, specifically in the context of health in AMR in beekeeping. So it's really a very interesting alternative approach. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us at this debate. I will address a few questions to you and ask for your opinions on these. So the first thing which came forward also from Irene's slides, so in Africa, but also in other regions, we see that so countries experience high difficulties with implementing that national action plan on AMR. Writing it up is an easy task apparently, but implementing it in a sustainable way is really not so easy. So maybe first to you, Tunya, why would that be? Why is it so difficult to focus on AMR and to make AMR management sort of an activity which receives sufficient attention in your country? Tunya.
About me?
Yeah, yes, please.
Yeah. Hello, everybody, and good morning and good afternoon, good evening for today, everybody. And now it's evening in Mongolia. So you can call me Tuya. Tuya is easier for you, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And okay, so I will talk about this issue. And about Mongolia, we had the National Action Plan since we had the G, that the Joint External Evaluation of International Health Regulation in 2017. So after that evaluation, we developed the National Action Plan, combined with the Human Health section. But actually, it was like, I have to say, we just knew about we should developing the National Action Plan, but we couldn't include a lot of things together. So why we couldn't make good implementation of that last NAP is we didn't have the budget, and also participation at the decision-making level was too low, and also awareness was also very low. And actually in the food and agriculture section, the lack of the professionals who knows about the AMR is very low. So at that time we couldn't make good implementation. But now this year we are already developed the second one. And the second one is more getting good NAP. Still we have NAP, and now we are trying to make the implementation. So the good thing is that we developed this NAP based on the PMP AMR application, because last year we had last year's November we had this evaluation, so it helped us a lot. And another one thing is that this year in October we had the multi-sectoral committee for NAP implementation. So tomorrow they will have this first meeting. And another one thing is that it takes time to get the policy makers and also decision makers to aware of the AMR. So, but now we have the good points. At least some decision makers are paying more attention to this matter. For example, State Secretary of Mofali is interested on this issue. And the last thing is I want to mention, we submitted the proposal to the multi-partner trust fund for AMR, and the title is for the One Health approach for AMR control. And it's also based on the National Action Plan. So if the MPTF approved this budget, maybe we can make more good implementation. Of course, this budget is from the outside, and maybe in the future we will have the budget from the inside of the Mongolia. Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Antonia. So, okay, budget is of course the most obvious reason and resource, financial resource, but I understand that there's still some work to be done in terms of awareness raising and making the policymakers aware of AMR, of the issue. So it's still not on top of their agenda. Mohammed, is there other issues you are dealing with in Pakistan on so what are the difficulties of implementing this National Action Plan?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, I'll be thankful for the organizers for giving this opportunity to us to share my views. I'm really thankful, first of all, the African experience that was in the last presentation on the PMP. These are actually the same experience that we had. Recently, we passed through that assessment. So I'm really thankful they were sharing all the things that we practically face during this assessment. Regarding this question of NAP implementation, we also, as Mongolia said, that we also had that officially prepared in 2017, and then almost 5 years are gone. The basic issue along with the finances, yes, there was a policy sensitization for the policymakers. So it was not the issue at that time. For 2-3 years, we have to take a lot of sessions, a lot of awareness thing to make the policymakers realize that this is an issue and we have to act on this. And second thing was the COVID era. Last through 2 years during the COVID pandemic, we also suffered badly on the implementation of that. We had quite a good of progress before the COVID, but during that phase, the activities were gone slow. So we are now we are very thankful that PMP tool has been implemented, and we have now gone through NAP, and we are really good tool to understand that what our sectors like agriculture sector, food and agriculture sector need to be presented in the NAP. So that's my overall. Over.
Okay, thank you. So again, also from your side, we see awareness raising to be an important issue, and luckily we have the World Antimicrobial Awareness Week to help with that, and hopefully the message will go through to the policymakers in the different countries on giving more attention to AMR. Diana, you have been part of the exercise in Liberia, so we've heard it already from Irene, but maybe you can specify more how the PMP, well, I hope it has helped you moving forward with the sustainable implementation of your action plan. So what specifically have you been able to do after you had the assessment in Liberia?
Hello?
Can you hear me, Diana?
Yeah, I'm getting you. Are you getting me too?
Yes, no problem. Yes.
Okay, so thank you so much for this opportunity to share the experience of the AMR team after the PMP assessment. The PMP and the assessment done sometimes last month in September. You know, after the assessment, the joint external evaluation assessment in 2016 in Liberia, gaps and challenges were identified. And one of the recommendations was that to develop a national action plan on AMR. And the National Action Plan on Antimicrobial Resistance for Liberia was developed in line with the Global Action Plan on AMR. And actual implementation of this AMR NAP for Liberia started by 2019. But the major challenge has actually been funding, meaning we have not really had financial commitment from the government to implement this NAP. And to AMR activity implementation, leading to an impactful result, the country needs to own the NAP, where government has to provide funding. Even though there are a lot of partners who are helping with activities implementation from the NAP, but there is a challenge, which is a huge one from the side of the authority, the government, to provide funding for this NAP implementation. And it is a major problem for us, considering the fact that AMR is a huge public health threat to global threats, food security, and even our own national development. There are some data that have been gathered on antimicrobial resistance and being submitted to GLASS, and even assessment and point prevalence survey being conducted in line with antimicrobial use. We see that there is a great need to actually have the government support on our NAP, AMR NAP implementation. And when fundings are provided by government, we found out that all of those factors surrounding NAP implementation are coordinated, will be reduced or will be met. Because like from the understanding we got from the PMP, there are a lot of sectors that are not actually captured into our NAP. And thank God that this PMP was conducted in Liberia, which will actually help us when it comes to revising our National Action Plan on Antimicrobial Resistance. And we are asking partners to actually help us with the revision of this NAP, 5 years NAP. So if this major problem, which is finance or budgetary allocation from government, is provided, when it comes to legislative enforcement, sector-specific AMR activities implementation, all of these problems will be met. Monitoring and evaluating, considering the human health sector, all sectors, and even the surveillance, detection of these resistant pathogens that are causing a problem for us, all of these will be met. So this is a huge challenge for us in Liberia, and to move from one level to another, we actually need the support from our own government. Thank you.
Thanks. So, of course, you highlighted the importance of funding, of course, and it's of course, without any resources, things won't be able to move forward. You mentioned that funding should come from governance, from the government, but maybe moving over to you, Henan. So, would there be in Mauritius any engagement by the private sector to invest in AMR management? So, or is it still an issue that should be addressed by and sponsored, resources should be supported by the government only? How do you see to move this application of PMP and the funding to move away from government only? Would that be an opportunity, or is this still too far away? Henan.
Talking to me?
No, I'm asking Henan now. Henan, can you hear us?
Yes, of course. I can hear you. So first of all, normally how our policy here in government, how it works. So the government has to disperse a budget, has to earmark a budget for your surveillance system. And at times you may get under the PPP, so public-private partnership, you may get some sponsors from the private sector, but it is not well, how to say. I think that the higher management people are not well aware and are not well versed about PPP, so they often take it like they're a bit like reluctant to take funds directly from private stakeholders. Okay, they see it as a conflict of interest. Maybe we should see a framework, a special framework how can we involve, how can we rope in private stakeholders to get funding, because the private stakeholders are more or less ready to provide, to cooperate and to provide funds. But there should be a proper framework so that it is acceptable to the at the ministry's level, which has not been worked out, I think.
Thank you. So, but yeah, it's clear that unless maybe you can, yeah, of course, you're from Europe, the private sector engagement in AMR, especially in your country, and you're representing the farmers in your country, has become very clear. So where does that engagement come from? Are there lessons learned for other regions? And how can the PMP encourage that engagement from the, especially to move to this public-private partnerships, as we call them? Is that, so what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, thanks for your question. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your invitation. And just for the audience, I'd like to say that I'm representing the Co-Eval AMR network project, which consists of a lot of participants from all over the world, from as far away as Canada and to Bangladesh. And we are comparing different tools, like the FAO PMP AMR tool is one of the tools we've been looking at. But coming back to your question, Koen, here I'm answering because I come from Denmark, where we have a long tradition of collaborating between the stakeholders and the competent authority and academia. So what we would say is that the question is about finding common interests. So for example, if you're representing the competent authority, your life will be a lot easier if you can find common interest with your livestock producers. Because, for example, if you want to go to the export market, you may have a common interest in keeping your livestock healthy while using as low amounts of antimicrobials as possible. So by identifying the common interests and by also giving influence to the livestock producers regarding how to set up the surveillance and control, then you'll have them operating for you, and you will make changes and you'll make an impact, which I think will be pretty close to impossible if you don't have your livestock producers with you. So I can only recommend to go in dialogue. I know it's sometimes in some cultures, there's no tradition for this, but I can tell you it's really worth it. So the competent authorities should set up the framework for how to work with the private industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz, sharing your experiences. And yeah, so we hope that this momentum can also be created by bringing all the participants together in the PMP workshop. So therefore, we also, if we organize these workshops, we insist of having the private sector invited to at least let them experience the AMR program and see how they can engage. And we moved even further, and then I come to Lara. Lara, you are representing the poultry sector in Italy, so which is very much market driven, and you have done a lot already on combating AMR and managing it. And then you asked us to do the PMP assessment for your poultry sector. So what's your experience there? Was it useful, even in a setup where you're already quite specialized in managing AMR? So what was your experience with the PMP in your sector?
Thank you very much for inviting me, and have to say that it's exciting to be there. PMP, first of all, show me, and this webinar show me how important it is to address altogether the AMR issue, and how one act, and I would say one word approach in fighting AMR is so important. So even if in Italy, especially in the poultry sector in Italy, we are quite advanced in a national action plan against AMR, I would say that last year, the PMP webinar, so the occasion we had also thanks to the University of Bologna and Professor Canali to stay in touch with this new FAO tool, For us, it has been really, really interesting because for the first time, we had the occasion to have all together all the stakeholders involved in AMR and antibiotics issue in Italy, which means public sector, Ministry of Health, regional competent authorities, but also academia, research, Ministry of Agriculture, retailers, consumer association representative, and a lot of people involved in the field every day. And this has been really a great occasion to see that from one side, poultry sector can be considered as a front runner in fighting AMR. The conclusion of the PMP day has been that, in fact, Italy and poultry sector in Italy is quite advanced because started in 2013 with an action plan on voluntary basis made by the association. We have the chance to represent the whole sector in Italy, and we have been successful because as maybe you know, poultry sector in Italy is fully high integrated. The high level of integration is for sure an added value in order to be fast and to be efficient in taking decision in using, for example, antibiotics. And this has been an asset that allows us in 10 years to reduce more than 90% the usage of antibiotics in Italy. And for sure, we are a kind of front runner for compared with the other livestock sector in which this level of integration is not there, for example, with the pig sector. What we are trying to do is to export our experience in other sectors. And during the PMP tool, we had also the occasion to see some gap that we can now address, for example, in raising awareness at all level. If, for example, starting from high school, creating a culture or appropriate usage of antibiotics at all level, in having maybe more funds for research, and also trying to find in environment related to poultry sector the presence of resistance to antibiotic. We have to say that now, together with this plan on voluntary basis, we have now Ministry of Health really in charge of this issue, because the Ministry of Health in Italy chose a really ambitious way and tools. We have now the veterinary electronic prescription for all antibiotics in livestock sector, which means to have a common database and lot of data available on time in terms of usage of antibiotics. And we have also another tool, which is the Classify, which is a tool, a public tool in which you can see all farms for all livestock sector can now see the level of usage of antibiotics and can create a kind of benchmark. So any farms can see how antibiotics they are using, if they are in line with the benchmark, or if there are rooms for improvement. So I think now we are on the proper way, because I'm sure that AMR is a One Health issue and is a public health issue. So I think that every one of us must do their own part in order to be part of the solution. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lara. So clear message here. We should address antimicrobial resistance altogether. It's really important, and not only from a public sector perspective, also private sector, but also within the One Health context, we should move it all that way. And then we can even go further, and that's why we're so happy that we have Giovanni with us, because he really helped us with moving the AMR problem to the beekeeping sector. And it's a bit of an odd, maybe route, but for him, it's very clear that AMR is an issue at beekeeping, and the PMP can really help us, or can help the sector with improving the situation there. So how does that work, Giovanni, in the beekeeping sector? Is it the same approach, or is it something different? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Cohen, for your question. and for having me here. So as beekeeping expert working on AMR, I can say that we have a different situation in the different continents concerning beekeeping. And for example, in European countries, antibiotics are not allowed to use on bees, and so their use is illegal. But this is not the case for other countries and other continents, especially for the countries with a large production of honeybee products, like, for example, China or South America. In any case, all countries should involve the beekeeping stakeholders to raise awareness on antimicrobial resistance, and should involve stakeholders on the responsible use of antimicrobials. So implementing the National Action Plan shouldn't be difficult in Europe, as the European beekeeping sector is far away from the use of antibiotics and is always more oriented towards sustainability and toward organic compounds. In particular, considering the large bee mortality that was recorded in the past year as a consequence of wrong use of pesticides. More advanced countries towards sustainability could therefore work as an example and pilot for all other countries of the world in promoting a new approach for a sustainable beekeeping.
Thank you, Giovanni. So, okay, the new approach we will go for also implementing the PMP AMR in beekeeping. Again, to the audience, to the participants, if you have any questions for the panelists, please share those in the Q&A so we can still have a few minutes. Diana, you have a question, please go ahead.
Hello?
Diana? Yeah, can you hear us? Diana, please.
No, not question really. I just want to emphasize here that with the PMP conducted by the FAO team, it really gave us insight to how to prioritize activities when it comes to developing a national action plan. So it will really help us when it comes to developing our national action plan this time around, because we found out that there were a lot of activities that were not really priority within the existing national action plan that we have now. But with this PMP and the understanding that we gather from the PMP that was conducted, it actually gave us insight to prioritize activity and then include other sectors that are very relevant when it comes to antimicrobial implementation. Thank you. That's why I wanted to emphasize.
Thank you very much. So maybe to the panelists and to all of you, and just raise your hand. So how can the PMP still improve? I mean, of course, the One Health issue is there, but how do you see in general things that can go better for the PMP? How can we make it more concrete? Any thoughts? Would you do it again, the PMP workshop, in some time, or is it really saying, oh, this is too much work for little effort? So what's your reflections on that? Is there anyone from you who wants to react? Mohammed, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. To me, that we recently, as I earlier mentioned, almost a month ago that we passed through this process. To me, that this process is under One Health. Although we are focusing food and agriculture side, but we should have a participation very well from the all other sectors, especially even from academia, health sector, environment, agriculture, plant. And one thing we learned during this exercise, that agriculture sector, especially the plant, the health kind of thing, those people should be in this assessment, and they are very useful, and there were very important information that was missing and coming from those people. So those were not present. So I will suggest that wherever this tool is being used, we should have a proper representation from all the sectors, key sectors that we know at the moment, which are involved for this reason. Over.
Thank you. So really go for the One Health, all-inclusive approach is really something to strive for. We're doing this continuously. We're trying to move it on, but it's a difficult exercise, where it's getting really comprehensive then, and even broader than, and even more complex than what it is at the moment, as Antonio mentioned. So I think we had a very good debate. Of course, time is not always so.
Okay.
Diana, want to say? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
please,
shortly. I want to say that we will really appreciate this PMP another time, because it's like monitoring and evaluating those activities that have been planned for implementation. So if we have maybe after a year or so to have this PMP come back, it will be fine for us, which will help us to know where we are when it comes to the implementation of our own. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. So let's continue the good work then. Okay, I think we can come to a close. We will stay perfectly in time. So I would like to thank all of you to be here. First of all, of course, the presenters, Antonia Farkash and Irene Uwaba, but also our panelists, Tuya, Mohamed, Henan, Diana, Liz, and Lara for having their time available to be here. Thanks a lot. Again, special thanks to June Kim, who is behind the scenes somewhere, did all this. And maybe the take-home messages, and which I have kept here, is so we should really work on raising more awareness towards the policymakers on the issue of AMR. And with those PMP exercises and with these workshops, those should be times where this momentum can be created and bringing the attention to the policymakers. And the second message I received is like, we should really address AMR altogether and bring all the stakeholders on board, private, public, One Health, and all engage them into this exercise of better implementing and national action plans in a stepwise approach. And for that, we can use the tool, the PMP AMR, to support it. And we still will continue with that from our side. And we will hope that we will be able to visit more countries in the future, near future, and later on to help you implementing the national action plan. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. It was a pleasure to be with you. It was a great and interesting, very interesting debate. Have a good day, have a good evening, have a nice morning, and hope we will be in touch soon to run a PMP workshop in your country. Ciao, ciao. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Nice day.
Bye-bye.